One of these days I will wash my hair before recording a podcast video, but I don't have it in my routine yet to wash my hair right before coming here.
Yeah, the days of the week really matter.
They do.
We've switched from recording on Thursdays and
Yeah,
Fridays.
yeah.
Really hot content. This is like
Yeah.
very good radio.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I too, the hair washing schedule is
It's
different.
off.
It
Yeah.
used to be I would do it on Tuesday. Well, I continue to wash my hair on Tuesday nights.
So I
do it
washed
on
mine.
Wednesday.
Yeah, I washed mine on Wednesday. Usually we record Thursday, or we were. So then Thursday, I didn't always look good, but it was cleaner than this. Mm-hmm. And here we are. I put dry shampoo in, but then I just checked your mirror and it wasn't effective. But that's fine.
We're all here.
Happy to be here. Okay, guys, welcome back to our podcast. My name is Jessica Hovert. My friends call me Jess.
I'm Layne Dealing-Churland, and this is Very Good Enough, a podcast from Very Good Mothers Club.
What are we talking about today, Layne?
Yeah, today I wanted to ask you a lot of questions.
Cool.
I wanted to ask you a few questions and have you talk for a long time about those few questions.
Oh.
And they are questions about childbirth.
Okay.
Which is a thing that you have done
I have done.
personally with your
have.
own actual body.
I have, and I have been witness to a couple of those as well, which was pretty amazing. And it's like a miracle I would love to do more of.
That's so cool.
I love it. Yeah.
That's so cool. If you're new here, I'm pretty scared.
Oh yeah.
About that kind of stuff.
I think I think your plan is to never do that. Is that correct? Oh, look at the hesitation.
It's always been a probably. Well, my husband's right over there.
Yeah. Shh.
It's not a secret. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I could.
We
it could still
started the whole podcast off, season 1, like episode 1 or 2, talking about how she probably doesn't want to, but he probably wants to. So we're in for a romantic comedy of a drama love story.
It's a conversation that goes out and then comes in about every 3 years and then goes back out and comes back in.
And where are we now in that?
We talked about this with a therapist before we moved to LA, like a little over a year ago. It just was like part of the, like, we're in this huge life transition. We're changing a bunch of things and like everything's just like up or open or out or all the conversations. And we talked about it for a long time. And then the therapist was eventually like, well, Connor, do you want to have a baby right now? And he was like, no. And the guy was like, okay, how about you guys talk about this again with someone when you do?
Yeah.
And
perfect.
So
that's great advice.
That's where it's at.
Cool.
So it's
stay tuned.
But whether or not I will do it is kind of separate from how I just feel about it, which is like so stressful to me. I mean, I don't love a medical situation sort of anyway. And I know that there are like 800 people out there who are already like, birth isn't medical, birth is natural. And I'm like, okay.
800 people.
Also.
It's more than that. Yeah, there are that. Yeah.
But also, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Right?
Totally.
The thing of like, when there's photos and there's like a head out and the rest of it's in, the bottom of my throat closes. I'm like, that baby's the wrong color. What is happening?
I like want
there's
people
so much
to send me
viscera.
those photos.
It's so slimy. The
lot of
whole
slime.
deal. Yeah. The whole deal is, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot to me. So I'm reading this book. I'll show it to you guys. I'm reading this book. It's called And Now We Have Everything on Motherhood Before I Was Ready. Recommended to me by a friend. And it is just this woman talking about the situation she got in where she's pregnant. She had to make a choice. Made a choice. Did the deal. It's nothing like super crazy or unusual. And that's kind of what's interesting about it is that she does a really good job. Like the middle 40 or 50 pages, I feel she's in labor.
Wow.
And so it's like long. I might be exaggerating, but that's what it felt like.
How old is her child when she's writing? Can you tell?
That's a really good question. I'm in the last 20 pages or so of the book and the baby's like 1.
Okay.
So I don't know what the time, like what the distance is.
The reason why I ask is because I feel like the further we get from labor and delivery, the less pages we need to talk about it. But when we're still in that first like year, it feels like it took a big chunk of it was like a monumental moment.
Yeah.
Especially if it went different than we expected, then like it would make sense that someone would write a book and like so much would be about labor and delivery.
Yeah.
But then as your kids get older and you've like lived more life, almost like as you just get older in life, there's a lot more that takes up space, right, in your memory.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend last night about how many women are walking around with huge feelings about their labor and delivery and probably aren't processing it with anyone. And a lot of those feelings are sad or traumatic or like scary.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of places to like bring those because you just sort of move right past it and like, okay, baby's here now. Be a mom.
Yeah.
And it's
Even in
interesting.
this, she was talking about feeling like in the middle of it, feeling like she's like in a war and like saving the world via this thing that she's doing, and then realizing like, but also no one cares. I'm just having a baby. It's like everybody's doing this all the time. Everybody else here is doing this exact same thing, but her experience feels like it's.
Yeah, I sometimes get those comments on my YouTube videos. I have like labor and delivery videos, or like one video having a baby without an epidural, and I get comments from internet people who are just like, millions of women have already done this, and that's it. Like as if like, why are you even talking about it? And also, is that number accurate? Probably more. How many women have? I mean,
way more.
Thank
than
you. That's the thing I want to respond. Is like, listen,
everyone since the start of human history,
Yeah.
except for what seemed to me to be the lucky few. In like pretty recent modern history. Who,
that's true. The lucky few. That's your memoir. The lucky few who escaped.
Yes.
I think people like try to minimize it because it's like, but it happens to everyone.
Right.
But then once you go through it or read a bunch about it, then you're like, whoa, that happens to everyone. Like, well, then why aren't we talking about that? Because that is like insane what has happened.
Yeah.
Her experience, was it good? Like, was it nice?
I think it was normal, not what she planned.
Got it. The hospital kind of deal, or home
hospital.
Or, okay.
But wandered in being like, I have a birth plan and it's this, and then got in there and was like, holy shit.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
I do want the epidural, but her baby was a little stuck, so she had like breakthrough pain.
Man. Okay.
And ended up getting a C-section.
Okay.
All of which you could either describe as like really normal, or in a very step-by-step, very personal way, like very big deal, very intense, weird feelings, wanting to like win at birth.
Oh yeah.
And being like, I didn't win, and yet my baby is totally here and totally healthy, and like the minutia of it being so intense, but also just being like, nope, she just went to the hospital. It went a little different than she imagined, and baby came out and everything was
They're healthy.
So it's this like weird, I think that's what has kept it on my mind so much, is that it's this strange sort of tense spectrum between like, obviously there are a lot of people who feel so strongly about what is and isn't natural. There are a lot of people on the other side being like, if there's a living baby and mom, then we're still in a natural circumstance. Get off that word. Hi.
Sure.
What I lived through was also natural.
Right.
Let's be more specific here.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about it, say unmedicated. Like there are people everywhere trying to protect.
Thank goodness there is the ability to go unnatural, because if we look at history, the number of women who died during childbirth is so high. It was like just an expected thing. It's like, if you end up on the other side having a mom and a baby who are alive, amazing.
Yeah,
so
it
it
like
wasn't
a hard maybe. Like women would get pregnant and then be like, okay,
hopefully
maybe I will have a child. Maybe I will be alive.
Yeah. And so to like shame someone or like, oh, well, they did it unnaturally. Like, okay, well, thank goodness that exists, because we have them both here right now, and that's really great.
Yeah. But then also you get into circumstances like this one, which seems so crazy and also so normal. And this is where I want to like dip into your actual experience, where there's an idea about what you want as an adult person.
Yeah.
Dealing with your own body and the baby that you made that belongs to you. And then the capitalism enters at this interesting point where you're in a hospital without like a strong advocate for what your plan is, and you're in pain that no one could explain to you. Like it's not you can prep for what that actually feels like. You can prep for the idea of it, and having to make these choices, and there's only so long that you can stay and wait and try to do that before capitalism starts to say like, hey, we need this room, we need these doctors, we need these people. And then you say yes to the one thing. And like that cascading interventions is a real thing.
Yeah.
Like the one thing does lead to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Sometimes it starts even before you go into labor. They'll be like, you know what? We need to schedule you for an induction around 39 weeks. It's safest. I hear it all the time. And maybe it's safe. I don't know. I'm always suspicious. There's a lot of reasons why people say it's safe that then you're like, I don't feel like anything is wrong. So why? But it's more like you've got doctors who probably are trying to plan their lives a little bit.
Totally.
I mean, they're probably on call. So if they can know we're inducing you on this day and this morning, then we can predict maybe baby will come, whenever it is. Like maybe there's some sort of that involved. And then, there's so much money in that world. It's funny. Even you bringing up the topic, I feel like, because this is like a topic where within motherhood, there are so many conflicting opinions to the point where, I've told you this before, but I've had people like watch my labor and delivery videos and then just have strong opinion. I can't believe you did it like that. And I'm like, can't believe I did it like that. Like, what?
Yeah.
Just do it different then. Have your own baby and do it different.
Even thinking about asking you this, I was like, gosh, is that too like I went through all these things of like wanting to protect you and then needing to remember that I only know about your birth because you've already decided to talk to me.
True. Yeah. Also I went through like a doula certification at some point around COVID because a friend of mine wanted me to be there for her baby to be born. And in order to do it, the hospital required that I get this certification. And then I had already thought of doing that because I make so much content surrounding this stuff. I just wanted a basic knowledge. I have like basic knowledge. I'm not a professional by any means, but it did open me up to a lot more information and stories. And then now in Very Good Mothers Club, we lead these calls weekly, and we even devoted a couple of calls to birth stories and specifically made it so that if women were carrying any sort of negative emotion about their own labor and delivery, that they could talk to another group of women.
Wow.
It was so powerful. Like the number of women who were crying. I actually had a friend who was near me, like physically near me where I was doing the Zoom call, but she was off to the side. She had a baby years ago. She started crying and she was like, oh man, hearing these women reminds me that actually I still have pain over the way mine went. I just never had a spot to talk about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's dramatic. Sometimes it's like I had an emergency C-section. Right. It was a trauma. It was a drama as well, like this big moment, and it was very scary. But sometimes it's just like, well, I wanted to do it like this, and then I felt like I failed because I did it like that, or I wanted to do it at my house, but I ended up doing it at a hospital. It goes so many different ways, but then you get people with strong opinions and also something that I experienced that I felt was really unhelpful. Though I respect the belief system, I just felt like I didn't see why it would be said. Some people believe that childbirth shouldn't be painful, and they have experienced childbirth with minimal pain, which I love those stories. That is amazing. I did not have that. Yeah. I've had 3 babies. There was pain involved in all 3, and I ended up getting an epidural for the last one. But I felt like it was particularly unhelpful after I had had a baby because people presenting that, what it felt like was looking down on a mom who did experience pain as if we didn't do it right. I know I'm on the internet, so I'm also getting messages from people that don't know me at all. So maybe in like this, maybe someone would say like, well, what was your frame of mind? Like, what were you, whatever. But it's sort of like everyone looking for like, well, why did yours hurt?
That is
not helpful.
So previously to this, we were talking about how I think that this seems like a design flaw. that what's coming out is the wrong size for the area where it comes out. And I just assume that evolution will take care of that in the next 10,000 years.
So all you have to do is wait.
10,000 years, maybe 20. But that's why it's painful.
Yeah. And because sometimes babies
body has to separate.
Like their heads are they're facing a particular direction, which can make it more intense.
Even when they're facing the right direction, your whole pelvis has to open and your cervix is so tiny.
But then it opens like an accordion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, what's the question? Yeah. What's the question about why there's pain? What?
Yeah. No, it's true. And actually I had a really, really wonderful experience where a friend of mine had a pain-free labor. her first baby. She was like, literally, like
Wild.
she didn't, it was so cool actually, like so crazy. She didn't even know she was in labor. She just went for a checkup and they were like, oh my gosh, you are almost dilated to a 10. So like almost to the very end where you're about to push baby out. She had no clue.
What is that
And then she was like,
mean?
oh no, I was going to go to In-N-Out and grab food. And they're like, you are not going to be able to do that. Baby is coming. So then she like gets set up. And then the way she described it, she was like, yeah, it was sort of like waves of an ocean just kind of crashing over me. Like I felt that there was like something happening in my body at that point. That would be like the pushing. I'd like to contrast that to me pushing Wilson out. I was like a bear, like a scream growl, and I was asking for wine, which makes no sense. And I was telling my sister, who's a nurse and a mother of 2, like, nobody should have children. Why is everybody having children? Tell me not to have any more kids. And I know, but here's what I'll say. It was the moments before he came out. So there's like this thing called a ring of fire that some women experience unless you do it right. And it's also my baby was almost 10 pounds and he was 23 inches. So it really was a jumbo little buddy that was coming out of a door that was smaller than he thought. Anyway, so my friend who had the waves of an ocean experience, little baby comes out. So amazing. Her next labor, she was like, nope. So much pain, ended up opting for an epidural. And she was not a mom who ever shamed anybody else for like, she didn't even pose it as like, well, why did yours not?
Yeah.
You know, she was like, yeah, I don't know. It was this crazy, amazing thing. I'm so thankful. But yeah, I've had some women interact with me as if, even to admit to you guys the amount of pain that I was in with Wilson, I've had people come back and be like, well, if you didn't think like that, it would have been easier. And I'm like, well, my vagina was ripping to shreds. Yeah. So how would you be thinking? And maybe they would be like quietly zenning, like, I can do this. And
the idea of thought policing other women.
It's weird.
In that moment.
It's weird. But what I will say is the demanding wine and demanding that nobody else have kids was very brief. And then Wilson arrived and all was worth it in the grand scheme of cost. And yeah, it just after I was like, yep, okay, I'll do that again. I'll do that again for sure. But then with my third one, the reason why I got an epidural.
Okay, wait.
Oh yeah, tell me. Oh yeah, so you want me to go? Okay,
here.
Cool.
Okay, let's.
Good. Yeah, what do you want to know?
It's already so good. I want to start at the beginning. Okay. Because you've also had babies over kind of a span.
I did.
Which is interesting, just like in terms of physicality, to have like a very young body, which is traditionally a little bit easier to just like shoot out a little baby.
In my experience, that's true. Easier even in the sense of recovery from labor. Younger was easier.
Yeah. And did you were ready to have a baby and you were like, I'm doing it.
Yeah. So I did not want to have kids and I got married at 20 years old and Sean has always been excited to be a dad. And so he was like, we're married. Like if we get pregnant, this will be great. And I was like, I can't even drink alcohol legally. So nope.
So cute and nice.
He's so cute and nice. Yeah. He's great. And so then I wasn't ready. And then right after my sister got married, so we were married 5 years, I just felt this peace. I have like kind of a maternal relationship with my little sister. I like we had some stuff growing up and my way of loving her felt very much like I need to care for her and make sure she's okay. So when she got married to a really amazing guy, I felt this sense of like, okay, she's safe. And it was the first time we were at the wedding. I was like, I think I could be a mom. And for 5 years, this had been like a kind of stressful thing where I would cry. And I was like, I don't think I can ever be a mom. I don't know that I can do this. Yeah. I thought that having babies like ruined your life. It had been sort of spoken over me that like, I was fine until I had kids or, you know, those things. Yeah. And I just believed it. So then told Sean, I think I could be a mom. And he was like, let's leave. Let's go make one. And so thankfully I got pregnant with Eloise. Like, I mean, it felt like first try. It was very quick. Yeah.
And that you're 25.
No. So at that point I was 26. Yep. And then with Eloise, so I did a hospital birth for her. I was very afraid of an epidural. I had a unique experience where a person close to me who I like knew firsthand and had talked to had a really, really bad epidural experience. Just like one that now that I've looked into it more, it is not very common, the extent of what hers was. And I'm actually not going to tell you what it was because I felt like it was more scary than anything else. And it spooked me. And so then when it came time to have Eloise, I was more afraid of the epidural. And my personality when it came to having kids was like, lots of people have had babies. I can't think about it. I don't want to watch any birth vlogs. I just want to go and try. And I had a friend who had had a baby a little bit before Eloise was due, and she had one unmedicated. And yeah, she didn't strike me as like particularly strong or particularly like nuts and granola. Like some people, they're like, I had a baby unmedicated. I'm like, I believe you. I know.
You sure did.
You don't even have to tell me. I know that. But this one was just like, yeah, I did it. And when she said she did it, I was like, oh, cool. Okay. If you can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
And then I did a hospital birth. Okay. Also, this is where you get like strong opinions in every direction. Where should you have your baby? Blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Like, I don't, I love all these different ways babies are born. I did not want to have a baby in my house. It doesn't sound nice to me. It doesn't, some people are like, but don't you want to rush home after having your baby? To me, no, I just felt like it's sort of a messy experience. I was pretty nervous. I mean, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So it sounded like an immediate yes to choose a hospital birth.
Yeah.
I ended up with a doctor throughout pregnancy that I really didn't connect with. And then we spent 3 months of my pregnancy in Spain, and I got back 1 month before my due date. So I flew on the last possible day you're allowed to fly. Like I had to have a signature that I was allowed. And when I got back, I met with that doctor. It was a gentleman here in LA, and he was like frustrated, like visibly frustrated with me for not getting certain testing done. But I had gone to a doctor in Spain and nobody told me to get testing done. And basically in his like frustration, he's like, well, if you had found out that your baby has this thing, whatever it is, which I'm like weeks away from having the baby, so I'll find out. He's like, you could have terminated the pregnancy. And for me, I was like, I'm at the end of my pregnancy. Like if you're still so frustrated about this that you would suggest, I don't know, it felt bad. So I left with like teary eyes being like, this just isn't it. So Sean wasn't with me. I called him and he was like, okay, walk out and go back into like the other side of the hospital. There's got to be other doctors there who deliver babies. Just go back in and talk to someone.
So practical.
Yeah. I mean, you would think I would think of that, but I think at that point I'm just like, what do I do? And can you switch that late? Because most people, they want to like work close hand with their doctor all the way through.
And there's this weird authority thing too when you're in the hospital. And it's like, it's different to like make a phone call to be like, I'm going to make a sneaky phone call and get rid of this doctor. But to be like, anybody can see me and I'm just here getting what I need. It's so simple and yet it's so bold.
It was perfect because I walked out, I walked around the corner, I walked into the next office, teary-eyed, very pregnant, and was like, I would just like to switch my doctors. I just had not connecting. I feel kind of like this was a bad experience. There had been some other things that made me unsure, but this was it. And Dr. Selena Lantry at Glendale Adventist Hospital, I'll tell you that because if you're here, you should go to her. What I found out was that so many women that I'm friends with here in LA who lived over by where I live had gone to her. She was like everyone was like, oh, she's the best. You got to go. You got to go. But she immediately like swooped in and like met with me right there and was like, I'm sorry this happened, but yep, we're going to do this. And she was a mom of kids and just like very understanding. So then I ended up having Eloise just a couple weeks later, a little bit early. And you can watch the whole thing. It's on YouTube, but it was all around good. And I didn't have an epidural. I think at some point I would have because the pain level was beyond what I expected if I expected something, but I thought I was probably too late to ask for one, which I think helped me because then I was just like, well, like I got myself here, like I got to push through. And it made for a climactic arrival versus like when you have an epidural that really works and it's like a really smooth epidural. I mean, for example, my sister, she was sleeping and the doctor came and is like, baby's coming. And her husband's like walking to get coffee. And they're like, oh, let's call him. Okay, here she comes. Just push, like very, very smooth. And she's like, well, I'm thankful it was so smooth, but also the climax of like, the baby's here. It was not quite there. So anyway, so that's how Eloise arrived.
Okay.
And it was all around pretty smooth. I mean, painful and long, but smooth.
How long?
Quite long, over a day, but I went to the hospital. What was kind of funny is they didn't really believe that I would do it unmedicated. That was something. And she wasn't like disrespectful, the doctor. She was just like, hey, statistically, the number of women who come in and say they want to go as long as possible without medication, majority of them request medication of some kind, pain relief of some kind. So I feel like they just sort of were like, just like hold off until she will request her epidural. That's what they do, right? But I went in, I was in labor. They said I could stay, but since I wasn't getting an epidural, like I could also labor at home. I don't live that far from the hospital. So we got like frozen yogurt, hung out, slept a little bit, came back the next day. And then I think she was born in the afternoon. And ultimately my water never broke. So the same thing happened with Wilson. Wow. They had to break it. And that's something interesting. Right at the end for both Wilson and Eloise, they broke my water. And then that's when pushing started. So like they broke my water and left the room. The doctor did both times, because I guess like normally, whatever normal is, that part then takes a couple hours. For me, it took less than 1 hour and the baby was out. And both times, like once the doctor had gone home, because I guess she was like, first baby, this takes a while. I don't know. But her house is right next to the hospital. So she made it back in time. But then with Wilson, they were like, we're going to break your water. And I was like, okay, that means he's going to come. Like that's what happens, I think. And with Wilson, I had been 10 days of like wildness in labor. And with Wilson, they broke my water and the doctor left the room and the nurse is standing right there. And I was like, he's coming out right now. Like it wasn't in between.
Good grief.
And she was like, no, honey, no, he's not yet. And I was like, he is. And my sister also was becoming a nurse. And I was like, look at, like, he's coming. I'm sure I was yelling it, but I was like, I'm not doing this. Like this is him. And, his head was right there. And then the nurse just like grabbed him, like, and he just like came right out. And then the doctor came back in. She was like, what?
There just was a baby.
So that was funny.
That's so crazy that baby just fell out of your body. Yeah. What was happening for 10 days?
So
before
10 days. Yeah. So 10 days. This is, it's all on the internet. So people can watch and people respond to me. So with Wilson, people
can watch what? There are videos of your babies coming out?
There are videos of my babies coming out, but not like graphic. Like I blur my vagina. Well, I think I can't remember. You'd have to watch. I'll watch. I'll send them to you.
We'll link them.
They're
for sure.
I can't remember how much I show, because I think like going back to Eloise, that was almost 8 years ago. I probably showed less. Yeah, you can see my babies coming. Well, so the thing with Wilson, he actually arrived on his due date, but 10 days before his due date, I started having regular contractions.
Wow.
And it was, so some people have written in like, that's called prodromal labor. Like that's not really labor. You might know that the doctors and people at the hospital, it wasn't as obvious to them. I was progressing. It was just very slow. So when I first went in 10 days before his due date, it looked like labor was kicking off. I was having contractions every minute or so. It was a lot. I have to go back and look at everything. I have it. There's a highlight on my Instagram called Wilson, and I know it's all in there. But I was having contractions so much, but then my cervix wasn't dilating a lot. I was like a little bit dilated, but not a lot. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was to the point where I asked the medical team there, like, do you think I should call my sister to fly in from Colorado because she's coming for the baby's arrival? And they were like, yeah, like this looks, from everything we can see, your body is progressing. It's just slow. And so she flew in the next day. And then, but from that day to when he actually arrived, we were in the hospital 7 different times thinking that he was coming. And each time it would be like, okay, yeah, you're definitely like labor is happening, but it's not progressing. And my water hadn't broken because with him, again, the water didn't break until someone broke it. And so then 10 days after all of this, they were like, why don't we, it's called like sweeping your membranes. Like they go in and they like try to separate, basically you got a hand with a glove inside you and they're just separating the wall. And people are afraid of the pain of it, but compared to the pain I experienced during childbirth, I felt like it was fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. But I could imagine if it's your first baby and you're not used to having a hand up inside you like that, it is painful. But it really helped. And maybe it would have been cool if I did that earlier. I'm not sure. But that triggered like full on labor progression, cervix dilating, everything much faster. And so then, I was able to go back in and then have him. And so like actually having him, like the point of like real progression of like cervix dilating and becoming more effaced, it felt like it was faster, but it felt like a really long labor. I mean, for 10 days, it was, I think part of what is hard about that, which I didn't realize until I was inside of it, is it's kind of stressful managing everybody else too, because, well, I also already had a kid. So there was that piece where I'm already momming. But then like, oh, is baby coming? Oh, okay. Well, then we need to go to the hospital, which means we need someone to watch Eloise, which means, Meredith flew in. Okay. Well, then we need to figure that out. Well, she can't stay for that long. It was a lot on my mind, not to mention my body is just physically tired because I'm having contractions all around the clock, even at night. So now I have a lot of compassion for women who are in that end stage of their pregnancy where labor is kind of happening, but it maybe hasn't gotten all the way to the point where baby's coming, because it's just a lot on your brain. And I know that like stress would then make labor slower. It's the more like you can be relaxed, the more dopamine you have, serotonin. It's the hormones in you that make you feel calm, relaxed, and in love. Those really help your labor to progress. And the more you have like stimulating things and people needing stuff from you and you're the mind in charge of everything, it can make things slower. So that one was tricky. But then I do think he was so big, and he was like 3 pounds larger than Eloise. So I wondered too, like maybe my body had to do more to prepare to get him out. And so I don't know how all of that works, but I just wonder like maybe that was part of it, is like we really had to do a lot of work to make all of that come. And then and then I surprise got pregnant with Juliet, but we call her Jules, like 8 months later. And I was talking to someone last night who's a professional.
Wow. It's like, you know that they're close in age, but then when you think about being pregnant and then getting to not be pregnant for so little time.
Yeah. And you're just breastfeeding and recovering, and it was COVID. Yeah, it was so many things.
COVID.
Yeah. And I found out I'm pregnant. I'm like holding a baby, like, no. I don't think I can.
Baby. Yeah.
That was wild.
Yikes.
Yeah. But I talked to my friend last night who works in this world of labor, delivery, nutrition. Like she knows so much about this, and she works with postpartum moms, and she said that you can do this test where it's almost like a blood test, but it's a hair mineral test. Have you heard of that? I had never heard of it, where they can check your mineral levels based on your hair. And it's like your average mineral levels over the course of 3 months or something. Basically what she said is after you have a baby, your everything in you is depleted majorly, and it takes some time for it to come back. She said something like 10% of your own personal minerals you're going to give to your baby. And then also it just depends on how you're doing as a person. And if you have babies really close back to back and you're very depleted, then the risk of premature labor, like having your baby early, is much higher. And that is what I felt. I felt like I had not recovered from having Wilson. My body had not yet like come back to a place of total health. And I was breastfeeding Wilson. And so for me, and how old was I? 31. Anyway, I felt like I wasn't yet back in action. And then Jules, I went into labor with her at 31 weeks. Okay. And then I was in the hospital for 3 days, same doctor who I love. And then they like gave me all kinds of stuff. This is also all on YouTube. And actually I've heard that this video is really helpful for someone who's going into labor early, because I like actually go through like, they gave me this and they gave me that. Now I can't really remember all of those details, but I was in there for 3 days. That one was a little tricky because it was COVID. So I was by myself because we didn't have childcare for Eloise. So Sean was home and I was there, and I was just like, please, baby, don't come out, because I don't want to have a baby by myself. And And then I was able to go home and just basically like try to be as chill as possible.
Wait, why were you in the hospital then?
Because I went into labor.
You went into labor
at 31 weeks, but
there
then
was still going to be enough time.
They can give you things to stop labor.
Oh, I see.
So they like injections of different things. I know magnesium was one of them, but basically the conclusion was like, this is real. Your body was going into labor. For now, these contractions have stopped. Oh, and the thing was, I didn't know I was having contractions. I went in at 31 weeks because I was having a lower abdominal pain that woke me up in my sleep and then didn't pass. And sometimes like when you're pregnant, you have gas pain that can be really uncomfortable, and it can definitely be concerning when it's your first pregnancy because you don't know like what's the difference between that pain and other pains. This one, because it was my third baby, I knew it was an unfamiliar pain, and I called my friend who has 6 kids and 6 C-sections, by the way. Wow. Yeah, she's amazing. She was like, so you should go into the hospital, just get that checked because it's unusual, and like worst thing that happens is they say everything's fine and you go home. But she felt like it was off enough that she's like, I'll come pick you up right now. I think you should go. So when I went in for that, they were like, oh, wow, are you feeling that you're having contractions like every minute?
Was this like a consistent pain? Like the pain just like
it was
was
just
unrelenting?
one pain.
Okay.
It wasn't, there was no starting and stopping. And so I guess it's because contractions were happening very close together, but I wasn't that big yet. Anyway, so then that was kind of shocking to me. I had Wilson, who was still a little guy. I had Eloise still home because of COVID, and our business was launching that month. Very Good Mothers Club. So we had all these pre-order things.
Gracious.
Yeah. And Becca was my business partner, was in Maine. So I was doing it by myself. So I think that because we started the business not knowing that I was going to be having a baby right when it was gonna, it was a whole thing. Anyway, I know that all of that contributed because when my water broke with Jules, which it actually broke, I was at Becca's house mailing out orders, and I was walking down the stairs carrying something heavy, which is like the thing not to do. So if you are at risk of preterm labor, don't walk down the stairs holding anything. Like really don't. Like someone told me if it's heavier than like a thing of milk, then it's a risk. And now I really know, because I really feel like that's what happened. Is I walked down the stairs carrying a box of clothing that we were shipping out. And then just whoosh, there it was. My water broke. And Becca's like, please don't have the baby at my house. I'm not ready for this.
But this is after.
So this was now 34 weeks.
Okay.
So
so it really stopped the labor.
So it really,
like they really give you something and then the labor actually stops.
Like contractions, Wow.
But
I really had to chill. Like I was doing my best, and I thought I was doing okay. And I was still having contractions like ongoing, but they had me going in maybe weekly to check on me. And each time I went, they were like, yeah, your body is progressing. Like it's clear that your baby will come earlier than we want. The question is like, how long can you keep her in there? And the big goal is like get to 37 weeks, because then you've got a full term baby. And so that was like the dream. And then it was like 34 weeks and 5 days or something. Like it was pretty good for me. I felt really happy that she had made it so long.
And it's so different from 31.
Oh my gosh.
Like if you're a gestating baby, those are really, really huge weeks.
Yeah, because I think my sister's baby then was born just a couple months later at 31 weeks or even 29 weeks.
Oh,
Can't remember. And he struggled. It was very, very hard. Yeah, he was tiny. So when I went into labor with Jules, so everything was different. So my water broke first, which was terrifying because I was like, oh no, in the past, when my water breaks,
the baby comes out.
Yeah, I like freaked out. Like immediately I like had tears in my eyes, like, no, I don't want to have this baby in the car. And it was Friday in LA. Yeah, Friday in LA. And I'm driving from Van Nuys to Glendale. In traffic,
a world away.
Yeah, and water's just coming out
so
of me.
stupid. That's like 4 miles, but it's going to take you 55 minutes.
Yeah, it was so long. And I'm in Becca's car, and she's so cute and great, and she is so scared. And she's like, do you want a Tylenol? I'm like, a Tylenol? She's like, for the pain? I'm like,
so nice.
Thank you so much for being such a good friend, but no, I don't think that's going to do it. So anyway,
wow, we gotta hear this story from Becca's perspective too. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's so funny. She did not like it.
No,
I mean, she was great, but I think we were both scared. It was like actually a frightening moment. And then by the time we got to the hospital, I was like sort of holding it together and like laughing because what do you do? That's so freaky. And I knew enough about having babies that I was like, okay, I could actually have the baby in the car. Like I would know how to do that. But I didn't know how Jules was doing.
Right.
Like I didn't know what her needs were being premature. And so I was just nervous. Yeah, tell me.
If you have a baby in a car, which people do.
Yeah.
But you also have an umbilical cord.
Yeah.
Do you leave that because you can't cut it because it's not sterile? That wouldn't be safe. Did you waddle into a hospital with the baby connected? The cord is just dangling out.
Or you can
Jesus
call,
Christ, you
guys.
I
know.
So
but also you could call 911 and they would meet you on the road.
Okay.
And then they would do that. And so you would just like keep it connected. Yeah. I know. Waddle in. Like imagine.
So
but that's
stressful.
the thing.
I feel so genuinely
That's what I was imagining. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I don't want to do this. I want to be that person. Thankfully, I wasn't that person. But so, but I will say so I'm like sort of holding it together. In fact, I think there's video footage of the car ride because I like filmed this process, right? But I remember once I got to the hospital and it was like my familiar place and I knew I could have a baby there and I knew I was safe, I like fell apart. I remember like crying and shaking and being like, this is so scary. And so not what I thought was going to happen. And I'm relieved that I'm here. And at that point too, because usually you go into like a triage where they check like, are you actually having your baby? Mm-hmm. And for me, because I had been in there before, they just immediately were like, yep, we're getting you a room right now. Like this is obviously, and also I had like the amniotic fluid like all over my pants.
Evidence.
Yeah. So, and then thank goodness, these girls from Colorado, Chloe and Kira, had come to stay with us. So at 31 weeks, when I went into labor initially, we didn't have help with the kids. And Becca wasn't here. She's someone that my kids would trust to stay with. But we put out on the internet, like family can't come because it's COVID. We don't know what to do. We have a guest room. We just need help. And these two girls that were friends who like knew someone I knew were already trying to move to LA and they're really good with kids. And they were like, we'll come and stay with you and help nanny if we can use the room in your house. And so they arrived during that period in between 31 weeks and 34 weeks, which is so amazing. And they were great. Like my kids are still so close to them and we love them so much. Anyway, so that meant that Sean could come be with me because at 31 weeks when I went in and Sean couldn't be with me, I was like, I just don't want that again. I don't want that to be the way we do this baby's arrival. And so, so Sean came to the hospital and then weirdly for that one, and the details kind of are blurry for me, but she took a while to come out and they then gave me Pitocin to induce me, but something went wrong with it and I wasn't getting the full amount of Pitocin and then they had to do it again. And so by the time I requested an epidural, I had been up the whole night and it was the next day. Sean hadn't slept. We didn't know how Jules was going to be. And so then I was like, okay, what if I get an epidural? Then we could both sleep. And then when she comes out, because I knew it was going to be one of those arrivals where when your baby's at risk for something, I don't remember what they call it in this moment, but the room is full of nurses from the neonatal unit. And so it's a little bit alarming, compared to baby's coming, it's pretty calm. Doctor's happy to be here. We can do this. This one was okay, we're setting this up. We've got oxygen here. Everything is set up so that when baby comes out, we're ready. And it was even will they be able to hand baby to me or will baby immediately need to be put somewhere else, for help. And so that whole thing, as we got closer and I was getting more scared, I think, I was like, yeah, cool. I'll take that epidural. We'll rest. And then both of us will be in our clearest head space for whatever's going to happen. And that was cute. Sean was so thankful. He was like, yeah, that allowed him to rest too. And because it's hard to watch the person you love in pain of labor, even though it's labor and something good is happening. Yeah, it's unsettling. And in our previous labor and delivery experiences, we had a woman there who is a mom to us, who's loved us since before we were together, and she's a birth coach. So she was in the room with us, and my little sister, who's a nurse, was in the room. And for both of us, that brought a lot of comfort, support. Sean said that was like huge for him because he didn't always know what to do. He was happy to be there, but like, where do I even put my hands on her back that would provide relief? Or like, she's very hot. So what do I do to cool her down? And so with Jules, nobody else was allowed to be there. And so sometimes he would call these two people, Gina and my sister, but still for him, he's like, this is just really like an unsettling experience. And then once I had the epidural and I was able to be more calm and he was able to get some sleep, then everything felt different. And then when it came time for Jules to come, which that I know is on YouTube, you can see her like actually coming out. Wow. Yeah, I blurred my nether regions, but you can see her head come forward. So you'll love it.
Crazy. I'm not going to watch it.
No, you don't have to watch it. That's
I'm
actually
watch
one.
0 out of your babies come out.
Yeah.
0 of 3 for me.
That one was one that someone was like, I can't believe the way she came out, and like something about like the cord being cut too soon. And then I had like real anxiety. People, yeah.
Medically assessing.
Yeah, I like went to Sean so stressed. I was like, I guess they cut the cord too early. And he's like, stop. She's okay. Everything's fine. Like people are stressing you out. But that's the danger if you put your stuff on the internet. Anyway, she came. I got to hold her. She was a big girl because she was big. At first, we were all like, maybe she's not 34 weeks. Like maybe we all just got this wrong. But then they were really great to show us, like, you can tell she's preemie because like the way their lungs are and like the way they breathe, something about their ribs, like it like gyrates or something. Basically, you can tell that the lungs are underdeveloped. So she was a big girl, and they said that she would have been at the growth rate she would have been bigger than Wilson.
Holy moly.
So yeah, which I'm like, thank goodness you came out at 6 pounds versus like 10 pounds. But yeah, then she came and I got to hold her for a moment, breastfeed her barely, because then she was taken to the NICU. And yeah, and then that was really hard. That whole thing was really hard. And something cute about it is that she was in the NICU. It's like a little NICU neighborhood with like all these beds of babies that are in the NICU. And she was giant and she was the only girl. So it was like big old Jules, like just in her bed.
Oh,
like,
cute. Like a little queen bee.
Yeah. And then all these little tiny baby boys that were like tiny, like hand-sized little babies. Yeah. And I got to watch a mom hold her baby on her chest for the first time in there. And she was crying and the nurse was crying and I was crying. And like you're supposed to have privacy. Like there's sort of these like little barriers. It wasn't the nicest NICU. I've heard some of you have NICUs, like my sister's, where it was like kind of a hotel room, like so beautiful and private. And ours was like one collective room. But I had a really good experience. People were kind. But yeah, I think that part, that's also on YouTube. I had a lot of tears after that and a lot of anxiety about bringing Jules home. And Wilson wasn't walking yet. And so just the idea of like, wow, 2 babies. Yeah, I was so anxious. And she ended up being in the NICU for 23 days. I checked.
That's a long time.
It was a long time. And they actually went through the whole process of sending her home after 1 week. And I felt so uncertain. Is that helicopter going to be in it?
You guys are going to have to tell us if you can hear. I mean, I'll know when we edit, but this is the loudest.
There are helicopters over
my neighborhood in LA 100% of the time. This is an extra one with like the double spikies. I could see it out the window from really far away, and I was wondering how disruptive it was going to be. A lot.
Yeah, a lot disruptive.
Yeah, right at this important moment of your story where things are really tender.
Monumental. No, so she
listen.
No, that's okay. She was about to come home after 1 week in the NICU. And usually what I hear from people who I love who have had NICU babies, you're like so excited for that. And Sean and I did not feel excited. We felt really like, are we sure about this? And like, what if because she would have different moments where it was like her breathing would stop, or it seemed like her heart would stop. Like just things were terrifying things. Right. Yeah. So, I go there, I'm crying on my way to the hospital to pick her up because I'm so scared. And I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm ready for this. And I went in, we did everything. She just still had 1 monitor on her, but I had signed the papers. I'm like packing up everything. And the last thing that's going to happen is doctor's going to come over and remove the last little monitor from her. And I'm holding her, and all of a sudden it starts beep, 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 beep. And and she wasn't ready to come home. It was like, oh, this is a big problem. And like doctor came and got her, and nurses came, and everyone took care of her, and she was okay. And it has something to do with like, I don't know, like reflux getting in her lungs. And I don't know, there was a whole thing. But I was so grateful. I felt like, because if this had happened, if I had walked out of the NICU and the door closed behind me and that had happened, I would have to go to the ER and I would have to because you can't just enroll yourself in the NICU. Like you get put in the NICU by the other people who put you in there. So anyway, we all just were like, wow, that was amazing that this happened exactly when it did. And she her bed was still open, everything's still right there. And they were just like, okay, we've got to take her. I'm so sorry. And I was like, no, like there's something in me that was like, this felt right. Like I didn't feel like this was the right moment. And later when it was time for her to come, which ended up being two weeks later, I mean, I was still nervous, but we didn't have the irregular things happening so frequently. And so I just felt more peace, like, okay, she's going to come home. We're going to be able to figure this out. But I had to do everything different with her. I couldn't breastfeed her normally. Like nothing was as it was for my other 2 kids. So what I had thought was having a third baby, like, it's my third one. I'll do this. I'll just do what I've done before and we'll just figure it out. And it was all entirely different. Like even I'd be holding her and they're like, you can't hold her like that because it could make liquid go somewhere and she could not breathe. I'm like, yeah, she could choke. You could make her choke like that. She's not ready for that. So just like all these things, Sean's like, wow, this is pretty terrifying for baby stuff. Yeah, and then it was really hard for the next few months. But then after that, she's tough as nails and she's so brave. And like somehow all of that seems like her personality, that she would just decide. Jules' personality is like, is exactly what you would imagine for a pregnancy that was a surprise. That's her. Like, I'm here I'm coming. And then she arrived early. Also, I'm here I come. And then just like brave and tough as nails. And like, did I tell you she had a black eye? No. Last week? We don't know where it came from. And we're not negligent. She just like, she'll like play, get hurt and have she was not crying, nothing. And she just comes and we're like, baby, did you hit your eye? She's like, yeah. I'm like, whoa. Whereas my second baby, Wilson, if he gets hurt, not only is it a huge deal, but like for days after, he's like, do you remember when I? And Jules is just like, can't be bothered. Can't be bothered with the pain. So anyway, yeah. There you have it.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did it feel like to get that epidural in the middle of your third birth? Like what's the processing of your brain being like, oh, this is different?
Yeah. One thing I asked is like, how experienced is your anesthesiologist? Because I didn't want anybody new. In fact, if they were like, oh, he's pretty new, I'd be like, I'm good. Yes. But no, it was great. And I expressed how nervous I was. I like actively chose that I would not feel like I had something to prove or something. Like, no, look, my third baby, I did all of them without medication. Yeah. But that's also because I didn't go into any of them thinking like, I'm going to do this to show that I can do it. It was just sort of weighing my fears. Like, well, which one am I more afraid of? Yeah. And it was by third one, I was more afraid that something would be wrong with Jules. And after I had Wilson, so the labor with Wilson was really hard. And in the minutes after he was born, I had to like calm myself down. It was like it wasn't the same as with Eloise. With Eloise, after she came, there was just this immediate sort of tenderness of like, oh my gosh, look, like all focus was on the baby. Yeah. And with Wilson, I felt like I was so heightened that I needed help coming back down to then be like, oh my gosh, my precious guy, here he is. And with Jules, I didn't want to need any recovery moment. I just wanted whatever she needs from me. Like, she's got it. And so it's definitely another helicopter circling.
It's circling. It's like a really full-on SWAT helicopter.
Yeah, what the heck? I wonder what's happening. Anyway, I was going to check Citizen app, but I'll wait. Yeah. So, and then it was such a positive experience, which I felt really lucky about because I hear of women who have bad ones. Or even just like not as scary, but just like, I don't know, I got an epidural and it didn't really work, or I got an epidural and it worked too much and I didn't like how I couldn't move or something. For me, I just felt like it worked nicely. I fell asleep. I was so thankful. They were so nice. Yeah. And I told my friends last night that when I drive by the hospital, I have really warm feelings, almost like a homesickness. Like, oh, I'd love to go back there and be with those people. Aww. And I know that that's not how everyone feels about their hospital experience, special. But mine was really warm and kind. And so, it was good. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I've been around other people having babies. And it seems like the most traumatic experience or challenging experience is when a woman goes into having her baby without considering that a C-section might be what happens. And what I've heard is like, well, I don't want to think about it because what if by thinking about it, I'm almost like inviting it. And now that I've been around a little while and I've seen more and more of these things happen, I would almost encourage an expectant mom to just know enough about C-sections to know what is like the basic process, or even like what questions could I ask back if they suggest it. A question like, is this actually an emergency? How much time do I have to consider whether or not this is what I want to do with my body and my baby? Because it seems like that is a really hard thing to recover from. Not just physically, the C-section recovery is its own thing, but just like the mental load of, I went in hoping for one labor experience and I left having had the C-section. And then there's a lot of pressure on moms when they have their babies to have, is it called like golden hour or something? I know that's what photographers call good lighting, but this moment where you like bond with your baby.
Oh, sure.
Skin to skin. And it's really precious. So some women can feel like that's stolen from them if somehow labor and delivery goes differently, or like the baby can have like low blood sugar or something. And so then that happened with Wilson. So then he was taken to just make sure he was okay. And it's a weird thing. Moms can then like almost be guilted later. Like, oh, is your child, I don't know, anxious? This is one that I think about. Like, is your child anxious at all? Well, it could be because you didn't properly bond after they were born, or even better, it could be because you were anxious during pregnancy. And I'm like, yeah. And that just makes you more anxious when they tell you you're going to pass your anxiety to your kid. And you're like, now I'm anxious about being anxious. Right. There's a lot on our brains trying to sort through all that stuff.
Yeah. Gosh. It's, raising children is so interesting because they are just people, and they're just people like we're just people, and they're going to just like live a life like we live a life. And we know that absolutely everything affects them. It all contributes to like what the makeup is of this like whole person later. But also we know that the trajectory of a person's life is built on the consistency over time of their experiences, and that personality and adaptability and character and like physicality, even like all of these things are most affected by like the duration of experience. So there are these big spike experiences, including birth, that of course have a huge impact and are like part of the factor. But what mostly makes a person is like the length of experience and like the direction over time. And so it's just so much pressure to say like this one thing or how you felt there, but also like, of course everything affects people just like it affected you. But like you're sitting here like a person, not being like,
you can come back.
Oh my God, my mom's anxiety during birth has ruined everything about me. It affected you if it was there, and that's part of the like soup that feels like you. But like the way that you feel is kind of like how your kid is going to feel like I'm a whole person, and there's all these things.
And you saying that, I'm thinking like, is our big goal to raise a child that's unscathed from any pain? Because adults who have never experienced pain are not adults you'd want to be around. They are not like there's so much maturing. So it's not like now I want to inflict pain on people, but just if we reframe it to like, oh my gosh, my kid's already such an overcomer, that's going to be really good for them. That's great, you know? But I did see this doula. I found her online. She does this thing that I would love to do with people, or even encourage you guys, you could do it by yourself, where basically she does this sort of healing practice with moms who have had traumatic labor experiences, where she has the mom and the baby get in a bathtub in a dimly lit bathroom with like candles and calming music. And I don't know exactly what she says, but my imagination went to all these places. It could so depend on like what your spiritual life is or what your faith life is. But so it's the mom and the baby in the room quietly, and you basically have a bonding experience and a surrendering experience of like the labor and delivery went this way.
Yeah.
We are okay.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful. We're okay. And a bonding and almost like a letting go of the thing that was past and letting this moment be the thing that you stand on versus like, well, everything started so shaky. And so that's the ground I stand on now. But letting the ground you stand on be like, nope, that's gone now. We did that. It's done. I'm grieving that, but then I'm also moving into my baby and I have a real bond.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so beautiful and like, do it. You should do that to create your own little quiet moment of surrender and healing and bonding.
Yeah.
And taking a bath with your little ones.
There are things that
so
are
sweet.
not, gosh, that is so sweet just by itself.
Yeah.
As a regular practice.
Yeah, totally.
There are things that are not in your control and then there are things that are. And there's so much of a birth experience that is outside of your control.
Yeah.
But there's so much of the way that you move forward with your child and yourself that is totally within your control.
Yeah.
Like you get to accept and incorporate those experiences and then grieve and let go of the pieces that weren't for you and then dictate this is going to be the kind of relationship that I have with my child. We're going to do this kind of practice forward.
Totally. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And guys, you all have babies differently and it's so beautiful. And I was kind of aware yesterday, I was talking to a friend who was talking about her labor and delivery stories. And I was aware of the thing that happened inside me, which is the same thing that happened when Layne said she wanted to talk about this, of like, it's suddenly a little bit like scary because maybe we're insecure or something, but there's this thing that happens where people are sharing their stories and it can almost become like competitive of like who did it the right way or who did it the best way or, oh, see, I knew. Like sometimes people do that. Oh, well, did your doctor do this? As if they're trying to find the fault in my story to validate the way that they did theirs.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's all vulnerable. And so we're all a little insecure about it. But I think if we can maybe just call it, like say, oh, this is in the room with us too, the insecurity, the fear. As with everything that Layne and I talk about, like, you know yourself, you go with what your gut says, you have your baby the way that makes sense for you and your family. And if something doesn't work, you change it and you'll know what that story is supposed to be. And then I didn't know anything about doulas when I had my babies until now with Jules. I know a lot more, but if you find that you and your people, whoever's going to be in the room with you, your partner or maybe a sibling or something, if you guys don't totally feel prepared for this baby's arrival, maybe think about having a doula with you. And a doula would serve as like a good friend, partner who's going to help like bounce things off of, like basically be the intermediary person between what the doctor is saying and what you want. And they can be an advocate for you, but they can also be like a clarifier and they can help ask questions in a moment when you're not sure what to ask. And I felt lucky that I had people in my room who could do that for me. I tend to be like more passive and trusting, like, well, the doctor said it, I must need to do it. And I was thankful to have people in the room who are like, no, that doesn't mean that, not necessarily. So maybe look in your area and see, do you have doulas who would be available? You can find like affordable ones if money is an issue, but just having someone else there who, or even someone you can call to say like, hey, this is happening. And then I know that in Very Good Mothers Club, depending on when you're having your baby, we have group coaching for expectant moms. And that's been really cool where moms will come and say like, hey, this week my doctor said this. And then it's a whole group of women being like, oh, no, or yeah, normal, totally normal. All of us had that. Or I'm doing a home birth. Here's what my desire is. Oh, that's so cool. Well, in my home birth, I did it like that. And then everybody could talk, or birthing centers, or however you do it. But yeah, I would just say, use support that's already there. There's support around you for this to make it easier. And and then the other piece about the doula that I hear a lot and I had no idea about is that you bond with your doula in a way that sometimes feels like a loss after you have your baby. This also can happen with your doctor, with your nurses, because you're going through such an intimate, vulnerable experience. You bond with these people, but to them, you're a client who's you're a patient, and that's the end. So a lot of times with a doula, you can ask, like, could I meet with you one time after having the baby so we could process that together too, because you were there.
That's smart.
And I recommend it because I've heard now, I mean, way more times than I expected of women being like, yeah, I actually feel like sad and like forgotten by this person. But that's because the expectation wasn't fair for what that role is. But if you can process afterwards, that might bring some closure. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such potent advice.
Oh, good.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us.
Yeah. I can't wait to be your doula when you have your baby. This is going to be so fun.
It's going to be your fault. I'm going to make you cut it out yourself. Give it to her. Put that scalpel in her hands. This is her fault. I'm not pregnant.
She's not. Clear. No, I was going to say the opposite, but I don't.
I am the opposite. It's currently my period. That's the opposite.
Okay. That's what I was meaning. But then
whole
I'm like, do we want to tell
morning.
them? Yeah. I love when I get my period. I was just telling Layne, I love it. And it's not even just because that I'm not pregnant. I feel depressed right before I get my period, just consistently every month, like a real depression where I'm like, there is no purpose. Everything I do fails. And then my period arrives and I'm like, all will be well.
It's your uterine lining just grieving itself on the way out. We built this for you all month and you're about to waste it.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. But Eloise recently asked for another baby. So, and someone told us they imagined us with 5 kids. And I was like, well, you can keep imagining.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids. I mean, it's fine if you have 5 kids, obviously.
I know. But here in LA, 5 kids in my little, I don't. So I probably won't, but we'll see. We'll find out together. Cool. Is that good?
It's good.
It?
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are great.
I love you
Thanks
so
for
much.
being
I
here.
love you so much after this hour.
Thanks for
asking
these questions. That's so sweet and unexpected. I did not see that coming.
Here we are.
All right.
Okay,
you guys are
happy
doing
with you
great.
guys.
See you soon. Bye.